Hi there, my name is Jacob and I'm an environment artist for Quixel at Epic Games. This is the fourth part of our extensive tutorial series covering the creation process of our medieval village demo project. In this one, we'll be going over import, setup and usage of foliage assets, specifically covering more elaborate systems such as procedural foliage volumes. In our previous videos, we were able to transform our basic blockout into something closer resembling a village beset in the middle of nowhere by adding our final houses and roofs. In preparation for our set dressing passes, we now want to start thinking about foliage, what we need and how exactly we'll make the best use of it. Foliage is a fantastic way to add detail, silhouette, depth and movement to your level, allowing you to tell small stories based on how overgrown or withered areas of your environment are. At this point, I want to use the opportunity again to remind everyone that the entire project is available on the Unreal Engine marketplace for free for you to download and dive into. So, without any further ado, let's jump in. I usually like to think of foliage in multiple layers. Arguably the most important or impactful layer consists of our big shapes, so trees and anything else large enough to act as visual blockers and silhouette components. The next level would be larger plants such as tall grass, bushes and ferns along with larger scatter assemblies. Then last but not least, I try to identify small scatters such as branches and small ground cover foliage like clovers, for example. This is admittedly an extremely simplified tiered model of how foliage actually behaves and grows in a natural environment, but it usually gives you a good idea on how to prioritize your foliage while also getting a good variety into your level. In Bridge, I make sure to thoroughly browse through our 3D plants section of our Megascans library. Keeping in mind our reference, I favor plants that would fit our environment. In this case, I opt for ferns, a bit of ground cover, small twigs and debris, grass, weed and a lot of dried shrubs. In the lifelink, I then disable the foliage painter auto-population and the LOD setup. Then I simply enable import master material textures to make sure that only really textures that actually get used by my master materials will be imported. Here I also made sure to specify our custom master materials to be used on import. Possibly one of the most striking components of the look of any foliage is wind. Now, there are a couple different and also really easy ways you can achieve movement, but especially for this specific case we wanted to make sure that our taller plants and ferns have nice semi-chaotic movement with visible gusts pushing the foliage around. If we take a look at our material, you can see that we are only really using vertex color information to mask the influence of multiple noise textures that get moved over the foliage in world space. I quickly want to stand out a single material function that ships with Unreal Engine. It's called Motion 4-Way Chaos and it allows you to power complex panning with really just a simple node instead of manually setting up multiple panners. Now, most of our plans come with the necessary vertex information all set up from the get-go. However, for some species we implemented a custom script that simply generates a gradient and applies that to the vertex color channels of each individual mesh. This vertex color gradient allows us to manipulate that information to control horizontal fall-off and starting point of the wind effect unique to each species. Furthermore, I used the existing noise data to affect subsurface scattering and the albedo to add more visual fidelity to wind gusts, making them more striking and visible from a distance. If you really want to dive deeper into this material and fully understand its workings, don't worry. The entire setup is available for you to download and dive into, and I highly recommend going through the material at your own pace. With our initial setup out of the way, we can now start thinking about how we are actually going to use foliage in our scene. A lot of what you see, especially along the main path, has been dressed by hand using the foliage painter tools, just keeping an eye out for good fall-offs and cluster variation. However, given the general size of the level, we also wanted to make sure that we have quick and easy ways to efficiently fill large areas of the map with foliage with only minimal work involved in order to allow for quickly reprioritizing and experimenting with level size and walkable areas. The best choice in our case were procedural foliage volumes. Now, these are volumes that spawn a predetermined list of foliage actors based on their growth rules. To give you a few examples, we created a dense forest, a light forest, forest scatter, wheat field, and also a shrub field volume. To enable this feature, you need to simply open up your editor preferences and make sure that you check procedural foliage. With that setup out of the way, the entire process is really as straightforward as specifying what foliage you want to spawn, and then just playing with their individual density, spawn and collision radiuses, shadow growth, age and iteration rules to achieve a somewhat natural looking ecosystem. We made sure to provide a link to the official feature documentation in the description below. It covers everything from initial setup to specific parameter effects and should provide all the information you'll need to create a beautiful procedural foliage system. Again, I highly recommend opening up this project yourself to dive into our setup, replacing our assets with your custom ones and seeing how this system behaves. After curating these systems, we can now drag and drop a foliage volume into our scene, scale it according to our desire and simply hit resimulate. Now, the entire area is filled with a complex foliage arrangement that would have otherwise taken us an hour or more to paint by hand. With all of the foliage setup and preparation out of the way, it's really just a matter of replacing what we had once blocked out with our freshly imported assets, filling corners of our world with scatter and giving this village the overgrown, slightly abandoned look we were after. Now, thank you all so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed it. In the next video of this series, Victor Öhman will be talking you through his steps of set dressing our scene, walking you through his approach, thought process and the various tools he uses. Also, you'll find all tutorials of this series listed in the description below. Please feel free to drop your questions or thoughts into the comments and, as always, I can't wait to see you in the next one.